We welcome back to the program David Lindsey, who has been with us in the past on occasion, and he joins us now in our studio because we have reported now that the Broome County Legislature has authorized the purchase of a vacant house on the city's north side that brings back some terrible, terrible memories. One of the most heinous and horrific crimes, certainly in my lifetime, and I would say in the memories of almost everybody listening today, the killing of 12-year-old Cheri Lindsey in March of 1984. David Lindsey, it's good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, Bob. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. And I also want to acknowledge that your wife, Jean, has joined us in the studio. She's opting just to be here, but she's I don't think she's inclined to talk on the program, but at some point during the segment, if she wants to join in, she's welcome to do so. And I have to tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Lindsey, this has always been such a horrific story for me to even talk about, and I can't even, here it is 3.5 decades later, I can't even imagine what you and your family have been through since you lost your daughter nearly 36 years ago.
Well, it's been an uphill battle all the way. Some things you can never forget. And we've had a lot of community support. I mean, a lot. There's not a place that we can't go where we run into strangers that will say they remember that day. So, I mean, they help us. They build us up and keep us going.
Well, when the county executive, Jason Garner, pointed out to me that the legislature has now given its approval to acquire that house at 6.5 Sturgis Street, several blocks from where you have lived for all these years, I immediately felt compelled to reach out to you, and so thank you for joining us. Let's talk about what this could mean in terms of a little bit more closure for you and for your wife and other family members, and frankly for the people of the north side, the people of Binghamton, the southern tier, because I truly believe that everybody who was alive and in our area at the time of this tragic loss, I believe that we all were profoundly affected by that.
Well, this will mean a great deal to us. We've been after that house for quite some time. It's been sitting vacant there, and it's a dump. And the neighbors are getting tired of it. And the kids on the street call it the Cheri Lindsey ghost house, which is something I don't think that we want to hear when we go down that street. I mean, that's not what that house was all about. But Jason Garner and the legislature, I have to give them a lot of credit for doing this. I mean, it's something that we never expected and can't wait to see it happen. Now, I put something on Facebook about this, and you wouldn't believe the number of people that said they want to be there when it comes down. So I imagine it's going to be quite a few people there when we get the exact date.
Well, as we reported on the air and on our website, the county executive says now that the legislature has approved the purchase of the property, soon they'll be seeking bids for the demolition, and so there's an expectation that the building that brings back all these horrible memories could finally be removed this spring.
Well, I hope so. We want it down. Like I said, it's in terrible shape, and it has no business being there, to tell you the truth. Nobody lives in it, and it does bring back memories when you go by it, and people talk about it. And it's something that we can put another notch in the gun belt, I guess we can say here, on this one.
And I know when we spoke about this, you mentioned looking ahead to the anniversary of the loss of Cheri Lindsey on March 26th, that perhaps it would be appropriate if the demolition actually occurred that date.
That's what we're hoping for. That was my wife's idea. She wants March 26th, and I think that would be very appropriate.
I think back, until yesterday afternoon, the only time I had ever been at that house was on the night of March 27th, 1984. I hadn't been there since the horrible night after the police investigators made the terrible discovery. And it was emotional for me as a young reporter at the time, and it was at night, late at night when I was there. But going back to that scene nearly 36 years later in the daylight and seeing this abandoned house where this tragic sequence of events happened, it was emotional for me.
It took us a long time to even go down that street. We avoided it for years and years. Finally, we decided to go down and see what was going on, and it was still the same old house. We'd never been down there. We was never down there right after she was killed. But the house is still standing, but nobody using it.
Well, it was almost spooky yesterday afternoon. Gray skies, bare trees because we're in the middle of winter. The front door, not the big door, but the outside door was just sitting there open, and clearly the place is in a state of disrepair. It almost sent a shiver up my spine just looking at the house yesterday, and also just thinking back to what happened there.
Well, the last guy that owned it, we talked to a couple of years ago, and he had no idea what was going on, what went on in that house. And after we explained it to him, he just stopped working on it. He was working on it. He was going to fix it up and rent it. And so I think he put it up for sale. It's been up for sale for quite some time, and we kept track of it, and nobody would make a bid on it. So we thought they had it sold at one time, according to what we were told, but it fell through. And I think people that find out what happened in that house, they just back away from it, and rightfully so. I know I wouldn't buy anybody's house that something like that happened to them. But
you told me too that some folks who had lived there for a short period of time, they encountered some unexplained things when they were in that house, things that just happened that were inexplicable.
We ran into somebody that lived there at one time, and she told us she had the house blessed and things like that, and said that she was out in her kitchen cooking one night, and the kids were in the living room, and something run past her, run up against her. She turned around, and there was nobody there. And then she told us a story about her kids were in there playing with their building blocks or Legos, and they had something really big built, tall, and they were away from it, and all of a sudden all the Legos went flying through the air. So I don't know if she's feeding my ego or what she was doing, but she seemed to believe things, that there was something in there, and they moved right after that.
During my few minutes on Sturgis Street yesterday, I encountered a person who lives near the house, and when he found out that it was going to be removed soon, he expressed gratitude. Obviously, the people who know the history of the house, as you have suggested, really have hoped to see this removed, and here it is decades later that it finally is going to happen. So he expressed relief, and I'm sure other people, as they learn about what is planned by the county, I'm sure they'll be happy. Ultimately, I understand after this house is demolished in the coming weeks, that there are plans perhaps to develop a community garden and have some green space at the site.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do down there. They said that green space and gardens, and they even wanted to put a memorial in there. Of course, we said no to that. We got the park. But we're just going to be happy that it's going to be gone. And that's the way we feel.
And you addressed something that I was about to ask you, was whether you and your wife believe it would be appropriate to have any type of acknowledgement of your daughter at that site.
Well, I really don't know. Like I said, we haven't even talked about that yet. Some people want something there, and others, I really don't know. Like I said, we have the park named after her, and things like that. It's, I just can't throw everything with her name on it. I can understand that, but it's just going to be a hard thing to decide.
Speaking with David Lindsey, whose daughter died in a horrible crime on March 26, 1984. I remember just in the early stages, after your daughter didn't return home, after the police launched what was one of, I think, the most intensive searches ever in the city, trying to find her, because she had been delivering newspapers earlier in the afternoon, I believe, and then I believe that she went collecting payments on her evening press route. Is that correct?
That's correct. She was one of her teachers in high school or junior high was going to have a baby, and she wanted to get her a present. So she went out collecting on the route to catch up on some people that hadn't paid their bill, and that's when it all happened. Now, she generally would have been with her mother. They never let her go on that route by herself. But it just so happened this evening she needed that money, and she asked if she could stop and go collect it. Her mother generally was with her every time she went out there on that route, because she felt a little strange. She's told her mother that when she was out there with that, especially with that Wales guy, felt strange going to his house, and because he always looked at her funny. And
James Wales Sr.,
that was right.
The man who killed your daughter, he actually, I believe, had that newspaper route and actually initially trained her to do that route several blocks from your home. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the press used to drop off the papers at his house, and she felt funny going there, picked the papers up when he was around, so we finally contacted the press and told them about it, and they brought the papers to our house, right? No.
It's just stunning. It's stunning. And I know as the police investigators, as your colleagues, I mean, it needs to be emphasized. I mean, you worked with these Binghamton police, the uniform officers and the detectives who were so focused on this case. I know, because not that they would have treated it any differently if it had been anyone else's daughter, but certainly because it was the child of one of their own. This was especially hit home as the search was underway for Cheri, and then ultimately as the details, as the pieces of the puzzle began to be put together.
Yeah, my wife, they asked her several times what she thought, where she would be, and she told them that if anything happened to her, it would have been the Wales house guy. So they concentrated on that, and they finally got the break that they were looking for, and took them in and gave the confession, and that's how they got them. And I got to say that there was cooperation from every department around came into the city to help look for her. The troopers, Endicott, Johnson City, Sheriff's Department, Binghamton, everybody. There was a policeman There was off-duty came in to look for her. Plus all the citizens up there, they were out looking for her also. So he wasn't going to get away with it. He would have been caught.
And finally, he did. I mean, he was, as they say in police jargon, he was the person of interest right from the start, as investigators began to come to the conclusion that your daughter just wasn't just missing. She didn't just go off with a friend, that something far, far worse had occurred.
You know, we knew our daughter. We knew what she was like, and she would have never run away. And she was just a happy little girl.
Now, her killer, James Wales, is 70 years old. And he is, in the past, he's come up for parole. And I know you and your wife and the community have previously been concerned when he's been up for consideration for parole. Just the fact that he was sentenced to 33 years to life in prison, but the fact is, even killers wind up being eligible for parole after a while, and certainly that's happened. What does that mean to you and to your wife and to those who knew and loved Cheri Lindsey when James Wales comes up for parole every so often?
Well, he'd done his full 33 years, and after he'd done that, he's eligible for a parole hearing every 2 years after that. Now he's had 2 of them so far, and we've got the community to get behind us on this, and I'll tell you, they were just outstanding. The last one was 2019, and we had a petition that was started by a young lady, and she garnered 10,000 names on that petition by herself throughout the community, right? And then we had letters, hundreds of letters written to the parole board in Albany, telling them to keep them in there, they don't want them on the street. So that really happened. That happened twice like that. And he's been turned down. And the bad thing about this now is that New York State is so much for the rights of these people that, you know, when he has his parole hearing, we're not even allowed to be there. I mean, we made our statements, but we had to go to Syracuse to make our statement. They couldn't even come to Binghamton, but we had to go to Syracuse to make the statement, and they read our statement at his parole hearing. But in the past, you know, you used to be able to go to the parole hearing, sit right down and look at him right in the eye. And I think that's probably why they stopped it, because it intimidates the prisoner. But we're not going to give up. He's coming up again next year. This year he'll come up for next year. So we got to do it all over again, but we're willing to do that.
Well, it must be just heart-wrenching to think that there's even the most remote possibility that the killer of Cheri Lindsey could ever be a free man again.
Well, there's a possibility. The way this governor's going now with, you know, no bail and letting all these people out of jail, we're just afraid he's going to step in and do something that would allow these people to get out of jail. It's not only him. There's other people that have done horrendous crimes up there in prison. And you don't want them out, but you never can tell what's going to happen now.
The interesting thing, and maybe that's not the correct word, but the reality is for many people, if not most people, who wind up committing a heinous crime similar to what brought your daughter's life to an end, they've been involved in the system typically in the past, and sometimes not just once or twice, sometimes repeatedly. They have committed crimes, and one would think that they would be on the radar of law enforcement everywhere, and something could or should be done to keep them from acting out in such a heinous fashion.
Well, they should do something. These people like him should be put in jail for the rest of their lives. They can't let them go back to prison, so they'll reoffend. Prison was their way of life, and his for 37 years now. So,
you, as a Binghamton police officer and as a sergeant, I mean, you were especially aware of people who were potential time bombs. I mean, and I think it's only appropriate to touch on the case of Arthur Shawcross, who ultimately wound up leaving Binghamton, and then, for people not familiar, not long after he left Binghamton, he wound up killing people in the Rochester area.
Yeah, he killed 13 people up there in Rochester. Parole board released him to Binghamton after he killed 2 young kids up in Watertown, 8-year-old and a 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl, I believe it was. And he got 15 years in jail because they made a deal with him. If we tell him where the body of one of the kids were, they would make a deal with him. So they gave him 15 years, and he was out, and he was down in our community. And I found out about it in the police department because it came out as confidential. They didn't want anybody to know about Arthur Shawcross living in Binghamton. But I told my wife about it, and she was furious because he was living in the Volunteers down there on Muscle Street. A lot of kids down there, a lot of kids. So I went looking for him, and I found him. He was on a riverbank. He was fishing. And that's how he killed the 2 kids up there in Watertown. He'd take them fishing and kill them on the riverbank, and that's where their bodies were found. But we were able to put the word out to news channels anonymously, of course, and he was run out of town, and rightfully so. He got him up to Rochester, where he killed 13 girls up there on the riverbank, I might add, and he was caught one night by some of the policemen that were staking out the riverbank, and they heard a splash, and they went down to where they heard it, and there was Mr. Shawcross coming out of the water. So he just put somebody in there.
So the reality is, a man who ultimately became a serial killer, he very, very possibly could have wound up killing people right here in the Binghamton area had matters not worked out the way they did.
I think he would have. I think he would have done it his old-fashioned way, right down in the riverbank. And like I said, that Muscle Street area up in there, and in country town, that's loaded with kids, just loaded with kids. And them kids they go all over the place. They go down the riverbank, they go down the park down there. And I must say, there's probably 200 yards from the park where I caught him. And I had a nice conversation with him, I guess. He was very, very humble to me. But what I did do, I was a sergeant, so what I did do, I brought every one of our patrol officers that was working that day, I brought them over one by one and introduced them to Arthur Shawcross. And everybody remembers that day.
Remarkable event there, and also just sad events that we have recalled this morning involving the loss of your daughter, Cheri Lindsey. David Lindsey, along with your wife, who is with us in the studio, Jean, I thank you both very much. I will always continue to keep you and the family in my thoughts and prayers.
Well, thank you. It's been good to be here again.
Thanks for your time. I wish you well.
All right. Thank you.